My name is Ava Anderson, and I'm 32 years old. 3 months ago, at my grandmother's will reading, my adoptive sister Emma stood up in front of 47 family members and estate lawyers, pointed at me, and announced that adopted children don't deserve to sit at the family table. She then handed me a $3,270 restaurant bill for everyone's 5-course meal, saying it was the least I could do since I'd been living off their charity for 24 years. The entire room erupted in nervous laughter. Some relatives even applauded. I quietly paid the bill, gathered my things, and headed for the door. That's when the family lawyer, Mr. Morrison, stood up and said 9 words that changed everything. "Miss Anderson, you need to see this document." Before I share what happened next, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy this story. I'm curious where you're watching from and what time it is there. Let me tell you exactly what unfolded that night. The Anderson family built their real estate empire over 3 generations, accumulating assets worth over $200 million. Their Beacon Hill mansion housed a private collection of Monet paintings and Waterford crystal that museum curators regularly begged to exhibit. I was 8 years old when my parents died in a car accident, leaving me with nothing but a suitcase and a teddy bear. Robert and Linda Anderson, distant relatives of my mother, took me in. From day one, Emma made sure I understood my place. "Remember, you're here because we're charitable," she'd whisper during family dinners. "Don't get too comfortable." She was 11 then, already perfecting the art of cruelty with a smile. The staff treated me kindly, but Emma trained them well. I ate in the kitchen while the real family dined in the formal dining room. Only grandmother Margaret saw things differently. She'd pull me aside during family gatherings, teaching me about investments, trust structures, and estate planning. "Blood makes you related, but loyalty makes you family, Ava," she'd say, her weathered hands holding mine. She paid for my Stanford education over Emma's loud objections. "Why waste money on an outsider?" Emma had argued at Thanksgiving dinner. Grandmother silenced her with a look that could freeze champagne. I became a teacher, choosing purpose over profit. Emma became everything a golden child should be: Harvard MBA, married to old money, a board position at 28. But grandmother Margaret always introduced me first at charity galas. "This is my granddaughter Ava," she'd say, emphasizing the word granddaughter, while Emma seethed behind her champagne flute. Looking back, I should have noticed how grandmother watched Emma's behavior toward me. Those calculating eyes missed nothing. Grandmother Margaret passed away on a Tuesday. She left behind an estate so complex it required 3 law firms to untangle. The will reading was scheduled for Friday evening, preceded by a formal dinner at Le Bernardin, grandmother's favorite restaurant. Emma organized everything, naturally. She booked the private dining room, selected the wine pairings, and created a seating chart that placed me at the far end of the table, practically in the next zip code. 47 people attended: family members, estate lawyers, financial advisors, and representatives from various charitable foundations. Everyone wore black except Emma, who chose navy Chanel. "Grandmother would want us to celebrate her life, not mourn," she announced, though we all knew navy was simply more flattering on her. The Hermes bags and Patek Philippe watches around the table could have funded a small school district. Uncle Charles discussed his new yacht between courses. Cousin Barbara compared notes on Swiss boarding schools for her twins. The wine alone, a 1982 Chateau Margaux, cost more than my monthly teaching salary. Emma held court at the center, regaling everyone with stories about grandmother's real legacy. "Family bloodlines," she said, raising her glass. "That's what grandmother valued most. The Anderson name, pure and undiluted." Several relatives nodded approvingly. My parents, Robert and Linda, stayed silent, focusing intently on their soup. The estate lawyers sat together, briefcases at their feet, occasionally exchanging glances I couldn't read. Mr. Morrison, who'd served the family for 30 years, kept checking his watch and looking at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Was it concern? Anticipation? Grandmother always said, Emma continued, her voice carrying across the room, that family money should stay in the family, real family. She looked directly at me. Wouldn't you agree, Ava? Before I could respond, she was already directing the waiter to serve everyone except me. She'll order separately, Emma said sweetly. Different budget, you understand. The room chuckled uncomfortably. The waiter hesitated, confused. That's when everything started to unravel. Emma stood up, her navy dress catching the light from the crystal chandeliers. She tapped her champagne flute with her dessert fork, commanding the room's attention. Before we continue, she announced, I think we need to address the elephant in the room. Every head turned toward me. Ava, she said, her voice dripping with false concern. Would you mind moving to that table over there? She pointed to an empty two-top near the service entrance. This table is for real family members only. It's nothing personal. It's just about blood. The silence was deafening. 47 people held their breath. Someone's fork clattered against fine china. The lawyers stopped writing. Even the waitstaff froze mid-pour. Emma? Robert finally spoke, his voice weak. Perhaps this isn't... Dad, please, Emma cut him off. Grandmother would understand. She always said family traditions matter. She turned back to me. You understand, don't you, Ava? After all, we've been more than generous all these years. My face burned, but I kept my voice steady. You want me to move? It's for the best, Emma said. This is a family matter. A real family matter. Nervous laughter rippled through the room. Cousin Barbara actually giggled. Oh, Emma, you're terrible, she said, but she was smiling. Uncle Charles raised his glass in mock salute. My adoptive parents, Robert and Linda, stared at their plates like they contained the secrets of the universe. I stood up slowly, gathering my purse. Of course, I said. Whatever makes you comfortable. See, Emma addressed the room. She understands her place. She always has. That's when the waiter approached with a leather folder. He looked confused, glancing between Emma and me. Emma's smile widened. Oh, perfect, she said. The check. Give it to her. The waiter hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the situation unfolding before him. Emma's perfectly manicured finger pointed directly at me. The entire bill, she instructed. She'll be handling it. I opened the leather folder. The number at the bottom made my teacher's salary weep. $370. The itemized list read like a wealthy person's grocery list. Bottle service of the Chateau Margaux at $1,200. 7-course tasting menus at $195 per person. Service charge of $570. Emma had even added a champagne toast in grandmother's honor. Dom Perignon, naturally. Consider it your contribution to the family, Emma said, loud enough for everyone to hear. 24 years of room and board, private schools, Stanford tuition. This is the very least you can do. The room watched me like I was reality television. Some relatives whispered behind their hands. Others openly smirked. The lawyers remained stone-faced, though Morrison's jaw tightened visibly. I pulled out my credit card, the one I'd been responsibly paying off for 3 years, and placed it in the folder. The waiter looked mortified. Miss, are you sure? She's sure, Emma interrupted. Aren't you, Ava? I met her eyes. Absolutely certain. As the waiter processed my card, Emma continued her performance. You see, everyone? This is what grandmother meant by knowing your place in the family structure. Some contribute bloodlines and legacy. Others contribute, well, they contribute what they can. Uncle Charles actually applauded. Well said, Emma. Margaret would be proud. The waiter returned with my card and receipt. My signature was steady despite my shaking hands. $3,270. 6 weeks of teaching calculus to teenagers. Gone. I stood up, tucked my purse under my arm, and headed for the door. Behind me, Emma's voice rang out. Don't forget to tip! The room erupted in laughter. Real, genuine laughter. At me, at the orphan who'd just been put in her place. My hand was on the door handle when a voice cut through the noise. Ms. Anderson, please wait. I kept walking. My heels clicked against the marble floor in a rhythm that matched my racing heartbeat. Behind me, chairs scraped and voices murmured. Let her go, I heard Emma say. This is for the best. 24 years and still an outsider, Cousin Barbara stage whispered. Some people just don't belong. My hand pushed through the heavy restaurant door into the cool Boston evening. The valet looked up from his podium, surprised to see someone leaving before the will reading. I fumbled in my purse for the valet ticket, my fingers trembling not from anger but from something deeper, the exhaustion of trying to belong somewhere I was never wanted. Ms. Anderson! The voice was louder now, more insistent. Footsteps behind me. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. If I looked back at that room full of people who'd watched my humiliation like dinner theater, I might say something I couldn't take back. Or worse, I might cry and Emma would win completely. She needs to leave, Emma's voice carried through the door she'd apparently opened. This is a family matter, Mr. Morrison. Surely you understand that. Morrison, the family lawyer. Probably coming to tell me I wasn't mentioned in the will, adding legal insult to emotional injury. The valet brought my 10-year-old Honda Civic, a deliberate insult parked between Bentleys and Teslas. I handed him a 20, my last cash until Monday's direct deposit. He looked at the bill, then at my face, and tried to hand it back. Miss, you don't have to. Please, I said. Just take it. Ms. Anderson, I must insist you return to the dining room. Morrison's voice was different now, urgent, almost desperate. There's a document you need to see immediately. She doesn't need to see anything, Emma snapped. She'd followed him out, her heels clicking authoritatively. The will reading is for family beneficiaries only. Morrison turned to face her, and for the first time in 30 years of serving the Anderson family, he raised his voice. Ms. Harrison, you have no idea what your grandmother has done. The valet stood frozen, keys in hand. Emma's face went pale under the streetlights, and I finally turned around. Morrison held a thick folder with the Massachusetts Superior Court seal visible even from 10 feet away. His expression was grim, but determined. 5 minutes, he said to me. That's all I need. James Morrison had served the Anderson family since before I was born. In 30 years, I'd never seen him challenge a family member directly. Now, he stood between Emma and me, his folder held like a shield. This concerns the entire estate, he said, his voice carrying the authority of 3 decades of legal practice. Ms. Anderson needs to be present for what I'm about to reveal. Emma laughed, but it sounded forced. James, you're being dramatic. Whatever pittance grandmother left her, maybe some books or jewelry, can be handled separately. This isn't about personal bequests, Morrison replied. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Ms. Anderson, your grandmother left specific instructions, documents that must be reviewed before the will reading proceeds. What documents? Emma demanded. I've seen the will. I helped grandmother draft it last year. Morrison's eyebrows rose slightly. You saw a will, not the controlling documents. The small crowd that had followed us outside grew quiet. Several lawyers from the other firms exchanged meaningful glances. Emma's husband, Richard, emerged from the restaurant looking confused. Darling, what's happening? He asked. Morrison's lost his mind, Emma said, but uncertainty crept into her voice. He's suggesting there are documents I don't know about. Not suggesting, Morrison corrected, stating as legal fact. He turned to me again. Ms. Anderson, please. Your grandmother was very specific. These documents must be presented with all parties present. I looked at the folder in his hands. The court seal was real. So were the stamps from 3 different law firms, Morrison and Associates, Brennan Legal Group, and Fitzgerald Family Law. Why would 3 firms need to verify a single document? Fine, Emma said, regaining her composure. 5 minutes, then she leaves. Morrison shook his head. I'm afraid that won't be possible. Once you see these documents, you'll understand why Ms. Anderson's presence is not just requested, It's legally required. He opened the restaurant door waiting. Emma stormed past him. The other relatives filed in behind her, whispering furiously. I stood by my car, keys in hand, deciding. Trust me, Morrison said quietly. Margaret knew exactly what she was doing. The private dining room felt different when we returned. The laughter had died. 47 pairs of eyes tracked my movement as Morrison led me to the front of the room. Emma sat rigid in her chair, her fingers drumming against the mahogany table. Morrison set his folder on the podium typically reserved for wedding toasts. The sound echoed. He withdrew a document bound in blue legal backing, its edges pristine despite its age. The Anderson Family Education Trust, he announced, holding it up for everyone to see. Established August 15, 1995. Emma's drumming stopped. What are you talking about? There's no education trust. Current value $50 million, Morrison continued as if she hadn't spoken. Established by Margaret Anderson when Ms. Ava Anderson was formally adopted into the family. The room gasped collectively. Uncle Charles nearly choked on his wine. Emma stood up so fast her chair toppled backward. That's impossible, she said. I would know about $50 million. I've been managing grandmother's finances for 5 years. Morrison pulled out another document. This trust was established separately from the family estate, verified and notarized by 3 independent law firms. He gestured to the other lawyers present. Mr. Brennan, Ms. Fitzgerald, would you confirm the authenticity? Both lawyers nodded. Brennan spoke first. We've maintained sealed copies since 1995. The documents are legitimate. But why? Emma's voice cracked. Why wouldn't grandmother tell me? Morrison's expression remained neutral, but I caught something in his eyes. Satisfaction? Perhaps because of Section 7.3 of the trust documents. Would you like me to read it aloud? The room leaned forward. Emma gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white against the dark wood. Her husband Richard pulled her chair upright, but she didn't sit. Section 7.3, Morrison read, is titled The Discrimination Clause. He paused, letting the words sink in. It states in essence that any family member who discriminates against, marginalizes, or otherwise mistreats an adopted member of the Anderson family forfeits all rights to both the trust and their inheritance from the primary estate. Someone dropped a glass. It shattered against the floor, champagne spreading like liquid gold across Italian marble. Emma's face had gone from pale to ashen. You're lying. Morrison turned the document toward her. Would you like to read it yourself? Your grandmother's signature is right there, witnessed, notarized, and filed with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Morrison continued reading, his voice steady as a metronome. The clause specifically defines discrimination as public humiliation, exclusion from family events, verbal abuse regarding adoption status, or any attempt to diminish the adopted person's standing within the family structure. The room was so quiet I could hear the air conditioning humming. Emma remained standing, frozen like a statue in navy Chanel. Furthermore, Morrison said, the trust names a sole trustee with complete discretionary power over distributions. He looked directly at me. Ms. Ava Anderson. I felt the blood drain from my face. That's not possible. I've never seen these documents. Your grandmother didn't want you to, Morrison explained. She believed power without preparation could corrupt. She planned to tell you on your 35th birthday. However, she included a contingency. If any family member violated the discrimination clause publicly, with witnesses present, the trust would activate immediately. Emma laughed, but it sounded hysterical. This is ridiculous. You can't retroactively punish someone for... She stopped mid-sentence, realizing what she'd just admitted. Tonight's events, Morrison said carefully, were witnessed by 47 people, including officers of the court. Miss Harrison, you instructed Miss Anderson to leave the family table. You made her pay for everyone's meal as punishment for being adopted. You explicitly stated this was because she wasn't real family. Richard grabbed Emma's arm. Darling, perhaps you should sit. Don't touch me, Emma snapped. She turned to the other lawyers. This can't be legal. There must be a way to challenge. Mrs. Margaret Anderson was very thorough, Ms. Fitzgerald interrupted. She updated the trust documents annually. The most recent revision was 6 months ago after the Christmas dinner incident. Everyone turned to look at Emma. The Christmas dinner where she'd given everyone family heirloom ornaments except me, announcing that family treasures should stay with blood relatives. "How much?" Emma asked quietly. "How much do I lose?" Morrison consulted his papers. "Your inheritance from the primary estate was $8 million. Was?" Emma's voice broke on the word. "The discrimination clause is now active. Your inheritance is forfeit. But there's more you should know." Morrison reached into his briefcase and pulled out a tablet. "Your grandmother left video testimony, recorded January 2023, 3 months before her death." The screen flickered to life. Grandmother Margaret appeared, sitting in her study, looking directly at the camera. Her voice filled the room, strong despite her illness. "If you're watching this," she began, "then Emma has finally gone too far." Emma made a sound like she'd been punched. "I've watched for 24 years, Grandmother continued. Watched Emma torment Ava with 1,000 small cruelties. I kept hoping she would outgrow her jealousy, her need to remind Ava she was adopted. I was wrong." The video showed Grandmother holding up documents. "These are records, every incident. The birthday party when Emma told guests Ava was just charity. The graduation where she introduced Ava as the foster kid we kept. The engagement dinner where she asked if Ava planned to tell her future children they were half adopted." Several relatives shifted uncomfortably. They'd been at those events, they'd laughed at those comments. "I knew this day would come," Grandmother said. "Emma cannot help herself. Her need to diminish Ava is pathological, so I prepared." She looked directly into the camera, as if seeing us. "Ava, my dear, you were never just adopted. You were chosen. Your birth parents saved my life in 1990. A story for another time. You were my granddaughter before any paper made it legal." The video paused. Morrison looked at Emma. "There's more, but I think we should discuss the financial implications first." Emma swayed on her feet. "Financial implications? You've been withdrawing from accounts you believed were part of your inheritance. They weren't. They were trust accounts." The room held its breath. "How much?" Richard asked, his face pale. Morrison consulted his papers. $1.2 million. Emma exploded. "You're lying. Those documents are forged." She grabbed the trust papers from Morrison's hands, scanning them frantically. "This isn't real. Grandmother wouldn't do this to me. I'm her blood." "Emma, please." Robert tried to intervene, but she rounded on him. "You knew, didn't you? You all knew." She waved the papers at the room. "This is a setup. Ava manipulated Grandmother when she was sick. Elder abuse. Undue influence." Morrison remained calm. "Your grandmother was examined by 3 independent psychiatrists before each trust revision. All confirmed she was of sound mind. Additionally, Ms. Anderson had no knowledge of this trust until tonight." "Bullshit!" Emma's carefully constructed composure shattered completely. "She's been planning this, playing the victim, the poor little orphan teacher." She turned to me, her eyes wild. "You poisoned her against me." "I've been managing those funds for years," Emma continued, pacing now. "I've been withdrawing from the education accounts because they're mine. I'm on the signature cards." "As a convenient signer only," Morrison corrected, "not as an owner. The funds were always trust property." Richard grabbed Emma's shoulders. "What accounts? What have you been doing?" She shook him off. "Investing. Building our future. Those were family funds and I'm family." "You withdrew trust funds?" Uncle Charles stood up, his face red. "Emma, that's embezzlement." "It's not embezzlement if it's family money," Emma screamed. Then she froze, realizing what she'd just admitted in front of 47 witnesses, including several lawyers. Morrison pulled out bank statements, spreading them across the table. January withdrawal, $200,000. March, $180,000. June, $300,000. Should I continue? The other relatives backed away from Emma like she was contagious. Cousin Barbara whispered, She's been stealing? I want my own lawyers, Emma said, her voice now small. I want them now. Certainly, Morrison replied, but they should know that Ms. Anderson, as trustee, has the authority to pursue criminal charges for the unauthorized withdrawals. All eyes turned to me. Morrison connected his laptop to the dining room's presentation screen. Suddenly, bank statements filled the wall, dozens of transactions, all with Emma's signature, all from accounts labeled Anderson Family Education Trust. These are the withdrawals from the past 5 years, Morrison announced. Total amount, $1.2 million. Emma's husband Richard staggered backward. Emma, we discussed every major purchase. You said it was your investment income. It was, Emma insisted. It was going to be mine anyway. Morrison clicked to the next slide. These are the trust beneficiaries: local schools, scholarship recipients, teachers' professional development programs. Ms. Harrison, you stole from children's education funds. The room erupted. Uncle Charles shouted about family reputation. Cousin Barbara worried about social scandal. The foundation representatives frantically took notes. Emma stood in the center of the chaos, her perfect makeup running in black streams down her face. Enough! I spoke for the first time since returning to the room. My voice cut through the noise like a blade. Everyone turned to stare. I walked to the front of the room, passing Emma without looking at her. Morrison handed me a folder. My folder now, I supposed. The weight of it felt surreal. Mr. Morrison, I said, please display the discrimination clause in full. The screen changed. The legal language filled the wall, but one section was highlighted. Upon activation of this clause, the trustee shall have sole discretion to pursue all available legal remedies, including but not limited to criminal prosecution, for any malfeasance discovered in the course of trust administration. You wouldn't, Emma whispered. We're family. I finally looked at her, really looked at her. The golden child who'd made my childhood a careful navigation of her cruelties, who'd trained me to eat in kitchens and sleep in servants' quarters even though the house had 20 bedrooms, who'd convinced me for years that love had to be earned through blood. Family, I repeated. You're right. We are family, which is why I'm going to give you a choice. Morrison handed me another document. This is a repayment agreement. Sign it, return the money over 5 years, and I won't press charges. 5 years? Richard gasped. We don't have that kind of liquid capital. Then you'll need to liquidate, I said simply. The house in the Hamptons should cover most of it. Emma's legs gave out. She collapsed into a chair, defeated. I stood at the podium where Morrison had been, looking out at 47 faces that had laughed at my humiliation just an hour ago. Now they watched me with a mixture of fear and fascination. I learned about this trust tonight, I said, keeping my voice level. Just like you. I had no idea Grandmother Margaret had done this. I never asked for it, I never expected it. Emma looked up. Mascara streaked hope in her eyes. But I understand why she did it, I continued. Every family dinner where I ate alone in the kitchen, every birthday party where Emma announced I wasn't really family, every Christmas where the family photos were taken while I was conveniently sent on an errand. Grandmother saw it all. Robert and Linda Anderson, my adoptive parents, couldn't meet my eyes. They'd been there. They'd allowed it. Their silence had been permission. I don't want revenge, I said, looking directly at Emma. I want accountability. You took money meant for scholarships, for children who might be adopted like I was, who might need what I needed, a chance. You took it because you believed you deserved it more than them. The discrimination clause, Morrison interjected, also applies to any family member who witnessed discrimination without intervening. The room went cold. Cousin Barbara's hand flew to her mouth. Uncle Charles loosened his tie. They'd all been there. They'd all laughed. They'd all participated in 24 years of casual cruelty. However, I said, and the room held its breath, I'm not interested in destroying the entire family. Those who sign affidavits acknowledging what they witnessed tonight and agreeing to support the Trust's educational mission going forward will retain their inheritances. Papers materialized from Morrison's briefcase. The scratch of expensive pens on paper filled the room. "Emma," I said, "you have a choice. Sign the repayment agreement or face criminal charges. But either way, your inheritance is forfeit and you're removed from any position in the family companies." "You can't," she started. "I can," I said simply. "I am the trustee." Grandmother made sure of that. She knew that power without accountability is dangerous. So she gave me both. Morrison cleared his throat. "There's one more thing." He pulled out a final set of documents. "The Anderson Family Foundation." Emma's head snapped up. The foundation controlled the family's charitable giving, their social standing, their connections to Boston's elite. It was worth more than money. It was power. "As of tonight," Morrison continued, "Ms. Ava Anderson is the sole voting member of the foundation's board." "That's impossible," Emma shrieked. "I'm the vice president. The board has 5 members." "Had," Morrison corrected. "Your grandmother restructured it 6 months ago. The other board positions are now advisory only. Ms. Anderson has complete control over all foundation decisions, including—" He paused for effect. "The annual gala guest list, corporate partnerships, and charitable allocations." I watched the implications hit Emma like physical blows. The gala was her pride, her yearly triumph where she played Queen of Boston society. The corporate partnerships included her husband's firm. The charitable allocations determined which families receive social recognition for their giving. Furthermore, Morrison added, the trust controls 60% of Anderson real estate holdings. Ms. Anderson is now the majority shareholder. Richard grabbed the table for support. His wife hadn't just lost her inheritance, she'd lost everything that made her Emma Harrison, social powerhouse. "Grandmother trained me," I said quietly. Everyone turned to stare. All those afternoons in her study, she wasn't just being kind to the adopted child, she was teaching me financial structures, trust law, nonprofit governance. She said I had a teacher's patience for complex problems. Emma's face went from pale to gray. "You knew. You've known all along." "No," I said. "I thought she was just sharing her interests with me. I thought it was her way of making me feel included. I never imagined—" I gestured to the documents. "This." Morrison pulled up one last screen, a photograph of Grandmother Margaret with a young couple. I gasped. I recognized them from old photos. My birth parents. 1990, Morrison said. "Your parents saved Mrs. Anderson from a house fire. They died ensuring she got out safely. She spent 5 years searching for their child. You weren't randomly adopted, Ms. Anderson. You were chosen. You were owed a debt that could never truly be repaid." The room was silent except for Emma's broken breathing. "Sign the papers, Emma," I said. "It's over." Emma's hand shook as she signed the repayment agreement. 5 years, $240,000 per year, plus interest. Richard signed as co-guarantor, his face the color of old paper. The Hamptons' house would have to go. So would the yacht, the club memberships, the private jet share. "Your company positions," Morrison said to Emma, sliding another document forward. "Resignation letters, effective immediately." She signed without reading. What was the point? Everything she'd built on the assumption of inherited wealth had crumbled in less than an hour. Around the room, relatives lined up to sign their affidavits. Cousin Barbara's hands trembled as she wrote, "I witnessed Emma Harrison publicly humiliate Ava Anderson regarding her adoption status." Uncle Charles added, "I laughed when it happened. I'm ashamed." One by one, they documented their complicity. Their inheritances would remain intact, but the price was admitting, in legal writing, what they'd done, what they'd allowed. Robert and Linda Anderson were the last to approach, my adoptive parents, who'd given me shelter but never quite given me home. "Ava," Linda started, tears streaming. "We're so sorry. We should have—" "You should have," I agreed, "but you didn't. Sign the papers." They signed. Their inheritance would remain $10 million. But Morrison had one more surprise. Mrs. Margaret's will includes a codicil regarding Robert and Linda Anderson, he announced. They retain their inheritance but lose all voting rights in family businesses. Those rights transfer to Ms. Ava Anderson. My adoptive father's shoulders slumped. He'd been CEO of Anderson Real Estate for 15 years. Now he'd be an employee reporting to me. The family reunion, Emma said suddenly, her voice hollow. Next month. The announcements. We'll proceed as planned, I said. You'll attend. You'll stand before 300 family members and business associates, and you'll apologize, publicly, for 24 years of discrimination, or the criminal charges move forward. She nodded, broken. The golden child who'd built her identity on being real family, while I was just adopted, had lost everything to the orphan she'd tormented. Morrison began packing his briefcase. Shall we proceed with the original will reading? There are other bequests to discuss. No, I said. I think we're done here. If you've ever felt like an outsider in your own family, you'll understand what happened next. This story is about to take a turn that nobody, especially Emma, saw coming. The document Mr. Morrison was holding would reveal something my grandmother had planned for 24 years. Before we continue, if this resonates with you, please consider subscribing. I share these experiences not for sympathy, but to show that sometimes justice comes from the most unexpected places. Now let me tell you about the clause that changed everything. Emma stood up suddenly, her chair scraping against the floor. Wait, her voice cracked. Please, just wait. Everyone froze. She walked toward me, unsteady in her designer heels, her perfect facade completely shattered. For the first time in 24 years, Emma Harrison looked vulnerable. I need to tell you something, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm pregnant. The room collectively inhaled. Richard's face went from pale to white. Emma, this isn't the time. 8 weeks, she continued, ignoring him. We were going to announce it at the reunion. The next generation of Andersons. She laughed bitterly. Real Andersons, I would have said. I remained silent, watching her. Do you want to know the truth? Emma asked, mascara streaked and raw. Why I hated you so much? I nodded. You were 8 when you arrived. Traumatized, grieving, barely speaking. And within a week, grandmother loved you more than she'd ever loved me. Emma's voice broke completely. I was her blood, her first grandchild. I did everything right. Perfect grades, perfect manners, perfect everything. But she looked at you like you hung the moon. The room was silent except for Emma's ragged breathing. She never took me to her study, Emma continued. Never taught me about trusts or foundations. I thought if I could just make you small enough, invisible enough, she'd finally see me. But the smaller I made you, the less she looked at me. I became the granddaughter grandmother was ashamed of. You earned it, Emma said, tears flowing freely now. Everything. Her love, her respect, this trust. You earned it by being kind when I was cruel, by staying graceful when I was petty, by becoming someone worthy of the Anderson name while I just expected it to be handed to me. She looked at the signed papers in Morrison's briefcase. My child will grow up knowing their mother was a thief who stole from orphans' education funds. That's my legacy now. Richard moved to comfort her, but she stepped away. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Emma said. I'm not even asking for mercy. I just needed you to know that I know. I see it now. What grandmother saw. What I was too jealous to see. She turned to leave, then stopped. Your parents. Your birth parents. Grandmother told me once they were heroes. I'm sorry I made you feel like you were anything less than their daughter. I stood there processing Emma's words. 24 years of pain, and it all came down to a child's jealousy that metastasized into adult cruelty. The room waited, suspended between justice and mercy. Morrison, I said finally, please pull up the trust's educational provisions. The screen changed to show scholarship criteria, grant allocations, teacher support programs. At the bottom, a line item, Future Generations Fund, unallocated. Emma, I said, your child doesn't have to carry your mistakes. I turned to Morrison. Create a subtrust, $500,000 allocated for Emma's child's education. From preschool through graduate school, one condition. Emma attends monthly therapy sessions focused on breaking generational patterns of discrimination. Miss one session, the trust terminates. Emma's legs gave out. Richard caught her as she sobbed, not the pretty tears of manipulation I'd seen before, but raw, ugly crying that came from somewhere deep. Additionally, I continued, the repayment plan can be restructured. 7 years instead of 5, with the first year deferred until after the baby is born. But Emma, you'll volunteer 20 hours monthly at the schools our trust supports. You'll see the children your theft could have hurt. Why? Emma whispered. Why would you do this? Because grandmother believed in education changing lives, I said. Your child deserves that chance. And maybe, working with those kids, you'll understand what grandmother saw in me. Not an outsider to be diminished, but a child who needed love. Morrison nodded, making notes. The therapy requirement is non-negotiable? Non-negotiable. Dr. Patricia Reeves specializes in family dynamics and adoption trauma. Emma will see her specifically. Emma nodded frantically. Yes, anything, thank you. I'm not done, I said. The public apology at the reunion stands, but you'll also share why. The jealousy, the fear, the pain. You'll be vulnerable in front of those 300 people the way you made me vulnerable tonight. Show them that cruelty comes from somewhere, but it can end with conscious choice. Richard stepped forward. Ava, we, thank you. This grace, after everything. It's not grace, I corrected. It's strategy. Emma's child will grow up knowing their mother made mistakes, but work to fix them. That's better than growing up with a mother in prison. Morrison pulled out fresh documents. I'll need an hour to draft these amendments. Do it, I said. We'll wait, said. While Morrison drafted the amendments, the room reorganized itself around a new reality. 3 other relatives approached me quietly, heads bowed like penitents approaching a confessional. Uncle Charles cleared his throat. Ava, I need to disclose something. At the company Christmas party 5 years ago, I told the board you weren't technically family when your name came up for the Community Service Award. Cousin Barbara joined him. I excluded you from the family cookbook, said recipes should only come from blood relatives. I even returned your submission. Thomas, a second cousin, added, I told my children you were just someone who lived with the family, not their real cousin. Morrison looked up from his laptop. The discrimination clause applies retroactively to all documented incidents. You're each forfeiting approximately $4 million. $12 million, collectively. They stood there, waiting for me to destroy them. Keep your inheritances, I said. But here's what you'll do instead. I pulled out my phone and opened a document I'd created years ago. A list of every slight, every exclusion, every moment of casual cruelty I'd endured. Not for revenge, but to remind myself it was real when they gaslighted me into thinking I was too sensitive. Charles, you'll sponsor 10 adopted children's memberships at your country club annually. Full privileges, no distinctions. He nodded immediately. Barbara, you'll chair a new committee for the Family Foundation, Inclusive Families Initiative. First project, a cookbook featuring recipes from adopted families, foster families, chosen families. All proceeds to adoption services. Of course, she whispered. Thomas, your children will volunteer as big siblings in the foster system. Minimum 1-year commitment. You'll supervise personally. Each consequence matched their discrimination. Poetic justice, grandmother would have called it. Morrison's printer hummed, producing the amended documents. As relatives signed their new commitments, the Boston Globe Society reporter, invited to cover the will reading, frantically typed on her phone. This goes to print? She asked me quietly. Anonymous sources only, I said. Focus on the trust's mission, not the family drama. Headline it. Revolutionary Trust Clause protects adopted children's inheritance rights. Make it about the precedent, not the people. She nodded, understanding. This wasn't about destroying the Andersons, it was about changing how every wealthy family thought about adoption and belonging. Robert and Linda Anderson hadn't moved from their seats. My adoptive parents, who'd provided everything except the one thing I'd needed, protection from Emma's cruelty. They sat like statues, hands folded, waiting for judgment. I approached them slowly. The room quieted, everyone sensing this was the conversation that mattered most. 24 years, I said. You watched Emma torment me for 24 years. Linda's tears started fresh. We thought, you thought what? That it would make me stronger? That siblings fight? That it wasn't your place to intervene? My voice remained level, but each word landed like a stone. You were my parents. That was literally your only job. Robert finally looked up. We were cowards. Emma was difficult, strong-willed. It was easier to let her have her way than fight her. Easier for you, I corrected. Not for the 8-year-old eating alone in the kitchen, not for the teenager excluded from family portraits, not for the college student introduced as our charity case at your anniversary party. The room collectively winced. They'd all been at that party. Your silence was compliance, I continued. Every time you looked away, you gave her permission. Every time you stayed quiet, you chose her comfort over my dignity. What do you want us to do? Robert asked quietly. How do we fix this? You don't, I said simply. You can't undo 24 years, but you can acknowledge it. I turned to Morrison. They keep their inheritance, but with conditions. Monthly family therapy sessions, with me if I choose to attend. Full financial transparency on all family business decisions. And most importantly, I pulled out a letter from my bag. Grandmother's handwriting, dated a month before her death. Grandmother left this for me to read if this day came. I opened it. She writes, Robert and Linda are good people who made weak choices. They love you in their limited way. Don't punish them for lacking courage, but don't pretend they were the parents you deserved either. Linda sobbed. Robert aged 10 years in 10 seconds. You'll remain in your positions, I said, but you'll report to me. You'll learn what accountability looks like. And maybe, eventually, we can build something real. Not parent and child. That ship sailed long ago. But perhaps something honest. They nodded, broken but not destroyed. It was more than they'd given me. 24 years of being treated as less than, and it all unraveled in 47 minutes. But what Emma said next surprised everyone, including me. Sometimes the most powerful position is knowing when to show mercy and when to stand firm. If you've ever had to set boundaries with family, you know how hard this next part was. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever discovered you had more power than you realized? Let me tell you how I decided to use mine. Morrison handed me a second envelope, this one sealed with wax bearing grandmother's personal insignia, a phoenix rising from ashes. She specifically instructed this be read only after all other matters were resolved. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. Grandmother's handwriting, elegant even in her final months, filled 3 pages. My dearest Ava, I read aloud, my voice catching. If you're reading this, then Emma has finally shown her true colors publicly, and you've discovered the power I've held in trust for you. The room leaned in, even Emma, despite her devastation. I need you to know the truth about your parents. On March 15, 1990, I was trapped in a hotel fire in Chicago. The smoke was so thick I couldn't see my own hands. I'd given up, made my peace with death. Then 2 people appeared through the black smoke like angels. I had to stop, my throat tight with emotion. Your parents were maintenance workers at that hotel. They weren't supposed to be on that floor. They'd already evacuated. But your mother heard me screaming. They came back. Your father carried me down 17 flights of stairs, while your mother cleared the path, checking every room for other survivors along the way. The letter continued. They got me out, then went back in. They saved 7 more people that night before the structure collapsed. They died heroes, Ava. Not just my heroes, everyone's heroes. The city gave them posthumous medals I've kept in my safe, waiting for you. Morrison produced a wooden box. Inside, 2 medals of valor, photographs of my parents, young, smiling, brave, and newspaper clippings I'd never seen. I searched for you for 5 years, the letter continued. When I found you in that state home, 8 years old and so lost, I knew immediately you were their daughter. Not by blood, by spirit. That same selfless courage, that same instinct to help even when you're hurting. Emma made a sound, maybe surprise, maybe shame. You were never adopted, my dear. You were reclaimed. You were always meant to be ours. The papers just made legal what was already true. You are my granddaughter. Blood doesn't make family. Love does. Sacrifice does. Choice does. I gave you power not as revenge against Emma, but as protection for others like you. Use it wisely. Build the family we should have been from the start. And remember, your parents didn't just save my life, they saved our family's soul. Without them, without you, we'd have remained what we were becoming. Cold, cruel, concerned only with bloodlines and bank accounts. All my love, Grandmother Margaret. P.S. Your parents' names were Michael and Sarah Chen. Yes, Chen. You've been signing your name wrong all these years. You're Ava Chen Anderson, if you choose to be. The room was silent, except for soft crying from multiple sources. The Anderson Family Foundation's annual gala looked different this year. The ice sculptures were smaller, the champagne less expensive, but the room felt warmer somehow. 6 months had changed everything. Emma stood at the podium, 7 months pregnant now, her hands steady on her notes. The 300 guests, Boston's elite, waited expectantly. They'd heard rumors, but nothing confirmed. Good evening, Emma began, her voice clear. I'm here to tell you about a mistake that became a lesson, and a sister I nearly lost to my own prejudice. She told them everything. The jealousy, the cruelty, the theft. She named her actions plainly, without excuse or euphemism. The room sat frozen, champagne flutes suspended mid-sip. Ava Chen Anderson, Emma continued, has shown me grace I didn't deserve. She protected my child's future when she could have destroyed it. She chose rehabilitation over revenge. Tonight, I'm announcing the Chen Anderson Scholarship Fund, named for the heroes who saved my grandmother and gave us Ava. It will provide full education for adopted children, from kindergarten through doctorate. She'd already repaid $400,000 of the stolen funds. The Hamptons house sold in 3 days. She volunteered 30 hours a week now, 10 more than required, teaching art to foster children. Dr. Reeves said she was making real progress. I watched from my table, surrounded by my students. I'd brought my entire 5th grade class as my guests. They'd never been to a gala before. Their wide eyes and excited whispers meant more than any society approval. Ava, Emma said from the podium, would you join me? I walked to the stage. Emma took my hand, the first time she'd touched me with kindness in 24 years. This is my sister, Emma announced. Not by blood, but by choice. My grandmother knew what I'm only learning now. Family isn't about DNA. It's about showing up, standing up, and sometimes stepping aside. The applause started slowly, then built. Not the polite golf claps of society events, but real appreciation for real change. Morrison approached our table later with papers. The foundation has received $17 million in donations tonight, all designated for the Chen Anderson Fund. I signed my name on the documents, Ava Chen Anderson, my parents' daughter, grandmother's granddaughter, finally, fully, myself. 3 months ago, I paid $3,270 for the privilege of being humiliated at my own grandmother's will reading. It turned out to be the best investment I never intended to make. Grandmother knew power without preparation corrupts, but she also knew powerlessness without recourse destroys. She gave me both the shield and the sword, trusting I'd know when to use each. The trust documents weren't just legal instruments, they were love letters to a granddaughter she chose, proof that family extends beyond blood into the realm of choice and commitment. Every clause she wrote was a protection, every provision a promise. You belong here, you matter here, you have power here. Emma named her daughter Margaret, not after our grandmother, but after the woman grandmother became by choosing me. The birth announcement read, Margaret Sarah Chen Harrison, welcomed into a family that knows love transcends blood. My students ask me sometimes why I still teach when I could do anything now. I tell them the truth. Money reveals character, it doesn't create it. The $50 million in trust doesn't make me valuable. Teaching them, protecting others like me, using power to lift rather than diminish. That's what makes anyone valuable. Robert and Linda attend therapy religiously. Last week, Linda called me daughter for the first time in 24 years, then immediately corrected herself. I haven't earned that word, she said. She was right, but acknowledging it was a start. The Anderson family empire stands stronger now, built on merit rather than blood, inclusion rather than exclusion. We've become what grandmother envisioned, a family that chooses its members based on character, not chromosomes. The $3,270 receipt sits framed in my office, not as a reminder of humiliation, but of transformation. Sometimes the price of dignity seems impossibly high, but the cost of silence is always higher. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've made it this far, you understand that family isn't about DNA, it's about respect, love, and how we treat each other when we think no one's watching. My grandmother watched, documented, and prepared. If you're dealing with family discrimination, please know. Document everything, seek legal counsel, and remember, your worth isn't determined by blood relations. Please subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share your own experiences in the comments. How do you set boundaries with family? I read every comment and learned from your stories too. Until next time, remember, sometimes the best revenge is a well-drafted legal document.